The howling wind rattled the windows of Ray's isolated cabin as he sat motionless, his scarred hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. 20 years in military canine operations had prepared him for many things, but nothing could have prepared him for what awaited on his porch that night. The scratching sound was almost imperceptible at first, easily dismissed as branches scraping against the siding. Then came the whimper, desperate, pleading. Ray's mind flashed back to Kandahar, 2008, another stormy night when sounds preceded danger. His canine partner then, Rex, had detected the insurgents moments before the ambush, saving Ray's entire unit. The memory of Rex's death 6 months later still haunted him. Since then, Ray had sworn off working with dogs, the pain of losing another partner too great to bear. What Ray discovered behind that door would change both their lives forever. Rain pounded mercilessly as Ray slowly pulled the door open, the bitter cold rushing into the warmth of his sanctuary. There, illuminated by a flash of lightning, stood a black German shepherd, a police K9 by the looks of her tactical vest remnants still clinging to her emaciated frame. Her dark eyes, once trained to face danger without flinching, now held only desperation. Huddled beneath her, shivering against the storm, were 3 tiny puppies, their eyes barely open to a world that had shown them nothing but cruelty. Captain Sarah Michaels, Ray's former commanding officer, had warned him about isolating himself after his medical discharge. "The mountains will swallow you whole, Davidson," she'd cautioned over their last phone call 3 months ago. "A man needs purpose." Perhaps she was right. Perhaps this was his purpose, finding him. The decision Ray made in that moment would put both of them in grave danger. But as former special forces, danger was an old friend. "Jesus Christ," Ray muttered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. His hand instinctively went to the scar running from his shoulder to elbow, a souvenir from his final mission. The shepherd didn't move, her body rigid with exhaustion, yet somehow still standing, protecting what mattered most. The rain had soaked through her coat, revealing ribs that pressed against her skin. Her left ear was torn, and a healed scar ran across her muzzle, marks of a working dog, but the fear in her eyes told a different story. Ray crouched down slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. 20 years working with military canines had taught him how to approach a traumatized dog. He remembered Master Sergeant Ortiz's training mantra, "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." Ortiz had trained the best military dogs in Afghanistan before a roadside bomb took his life in 2012. "Easy, girl," Ray said, his voice barely audible above the storm. "You're safe now." The shepherd's ears twitched at his voice, but she remained frozen, her eyes never leaving his face. One of the puppies let out a small cry, struggling to stay warm against its mother's legs. Without further hesitation, Ray stepped aside and gestured inside. "Come on in. It's going to be all right." For a moment, the shepherd didn't move, as if weighing her options. Ray noticed the intelligence in her eyes, an assessment, not just fear. She reminded him of Cora, the specialized Belgian Malinois that had worked alongside his team in Syria. That same calculating gaze that seemed almost human in its depth. Then, with deliberate slowness, she picked up the smallest puppy by the scruff and carried it inside, returning quickly for the others. Ray watched in awe as the mother made 3 trips, never once looking back at the storm, her focus entirely on her young. Once they were all inside, Ray closed the door against the howling wind. The shepherd immediately found the corner furthest from him, gathering her puppies close as she collapsed from exhaustion. Through the window, Ray thought he glimpsed headlights on the distant mountain road, appearing briefly before vanishing into the storm. The 3rd vehicle he'd seen pass in that direction this week. Strange, considering the road led nowhere except deeper into the wilderness. Ray moved carefully to the kitchen, filling a bowl with water and grabbing some leftover venison stew from the refrigerator. A gift from Hank, the elderly tracker who lived 5 miles downriver. Ray had saved Hank's grandson from drowning last spring, earning him rare friendship in these isolated mountains. He placed both food and water on the floor, keeping his distance as he backed away. The shepherd watched him with wary eyes, her body tense despite her fatigue. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" Ray said softly, noticing the frayed police insignia on what remained of her tactical vest. "Someone's looking for you. Question is, are they the good guys or the bad?" As if understanding his words, the shepherd's eyes darkened, and a low growl rumbled in her throat. Ray had seen that look before, in soldiers who'd witnessed things that changed them forever. "Message received," Ray nodded. "We'll figure this out together." He reached for his satellite phone, his only connection to the outside world since moving to these mountains. Reception was spotty, but he managed to send a text to Dr. Elena Patel, a veterinarian who'd served in his unit and now practiced in the nearby town. "Need your help. Discreet. Military K9 situation." That night, as the storm raged outside, Ray slept on the couch, giving the shepherd and her puppies space. Every so often, he'd open one eye to check on them, finding the mother always alert, always watching, even as exhaustion threatened to overcome her. She reminded him of himself after his return from overseas, unable to truly rest, constantly scanning for threats. "What happened to you?" Ray whispered into the darkness. "Who are you running from?" The floorboards beneath the worn rug near the fireplace creaked as the cabin settled. Ray had hollowed out that space years ago, a hidden compartment containing his passport, emergency cash, and his service Beretta. Old habits from a life he thought he'd left behind. Perhaps it was time to excavate more than just weapons. Around 3 a.m., the shepherd softly whined, her ears perked toward the window. Ray listened intently, but heard nothing beyond the storm. Yet he trusted her instincts more than his own senses. Something was out there, watching, waiting. It took 3 days before the shepherd would eat while Ray was in the same room. 5 days before she would allow him within arm's reach. A week before she stopped growling when he approached her puppies. During that time, Elena arrived with medical supplies, examining the dog and her puppies from a respectful distance. "She's military trained, no doubt," Elena whispered, her dark eyes studying the shepherd's behavior. "But there's something else. The way she positions herself, constantly creating triangulation points. That's advanced protection training." Elena had seen similar behaviors in dogs trained for high-level diplomatic security when she'd worked with the State Department after her military service. Whoever trained her invested years and significant resources. Ray named her Shadow, fitting for her dark coat and the way she seemed to appear and disappear silently around the cabin. The puppies he called Scout, Ranger, and Maverick, names worthy of their warrior mother. As Shadow began to trust Ray, her personality emerged. She was intelligent, picking up commands with minimal repetition. She would stand alert at windows, scanning the surroundings with military precision. This wasn't just any police dog, she had special training. One morning, as Ray chopped wood outside, he noticed Shadow standing guard at the window, her ears forward, eyes tracking his every move. When he returned inside, she met him at the door, checking him as if ensuring he was unharmed. "You were someone's partner," Ray said, kneeling to her level. "And a damn good one, I'd bet." That night, for the first time, Shadow slept beside the couch where Ray rested, her body still positioned between him and her puppies. But the message was clear. She was beginning to trust. Later that week, Hank stopped by with supplies. The old tracker froze when he saw Shadow. "Military?" he asked quietly. Ray nodded. "Folks been asking about a dog in town," Hank muttered. "Men in nice SUVs, not rangers, not local." The old man's weathered face creased with concern. "Whatever she's running from, it's serious. They're offering rewards now. That evening, as Ray cleaned his rifle, Shadow watched him with knowing eyes. The calm before the storm. They both felt it coming. 2 weeks after Shadow's arrival, Ray decided it was time to seek answers. The remnants of her tactical vest had revealed only partial information. A faded K9 unit patch with no department identification. Elena had agreed to a more thorough examination at her clinic after hours. Before leaving, Ray received a cryptic call from his former teammate, Marcus Wong, now working cybersecurity for a defense contractor. Been hearing chatter about a missing asset in your region. Highly classified, 4-legged. Anything else? Ray asked, watching Shadow herd her puppies into the transport crate. Whatever you do, don't take it to a vet and scan for chips, Marcus warned. That'll flag in their system. Too late for that warning, Ray thought. In town, the clinic's back entrance provided privacy as Elena examined Shadow and her puppies while Ray explained how he'd found them. She's severely malnourished, but she's tough, Elena said, running her hands gently over Shadow's scarred body. The puppies are about 3 weeks old. She's been on the run while heavily pregnant or with newborns. That's remarkable. Can you check for a microchip? Ray asked, ignoring Marcus's warning. He needed answers. The scanner beeped, and Elena nodded. She's chipped, but it's one I don't recognize, not standard vet issued. The information from the chip was encrypted, but the first 2 letters were visible. XO. XO? Ray repeated, his military background suddenly alert. Could that be Xylon Operations? Elena's expression darkened. The private security contractor? The one that had those allegations a few years back? Ray nodded grimly. Xylon Operations had been under investigation for illegal training methods and misuse of service animals. The case had been quietly settled, the details sealed. His former unit commander, Colonel Fisher, had once mentioned Xylon in hushed tones. Playing God with animal genetics was how he'd described their classified programs. I need to make some calls, Ray said. As they prepared to leave, Elena's assistant, Jackson, burst through the door. There's men asking questions at the front desk. They say they're from animal control, but they're armed. I saw shoulder holsters. Ray and Elena exchanged glances. Back exit, now. Back at the cabin, Ray contacted Mike Fletcher, an old friend from his military days who now worked in law enforcement with connections to federal agencies. Their friendship had been forged in the fires of Fallujah, bonds that transcended time and distance. Mike, I need information on a canine from Xylon Operations. Female German Shepherd, about 5 years old, specialized training. The silence on the other end lasted too long. In the background, Ray could hear Mike shutting a door, ensuring privacy. Ray, stay away from this one, Mike finally said, his voice tense. That dog, if it's who I think it is, was part of their elite unit. Call sign Phantom. She disappeared during a federal raid on one of their training facilities 3 months ago. They want her back badly. Why? What makes her so special? She was their breakthrough. A K9 trained for operations I can't even discuss on this line. Ray, Xylon has private contractors looking for her. Dangerous people. Mike hesitated, then added, Remember Lieutenant Diaz from Kandahar? She's leading the federal investigation into Xylon now. She thinks they've been running more than just training programs, genetic experimentation, performance enhancement drugs, cognitive modifications. As if on cue, Shadow appeared at Ray's side, her ears perked forward, eyes fixed on the window. Her puppies, who had been playing near the fireplace, suddenly went silent, sensing their mother's alertness. Someone's out there, Ray whispered, ending the call. Through the scope of his hunting rifle, Ray spotted them, 2 men in tactical gear moving through the woods surrounding his cabin. Their movements were disciplined, precise. Former military, Ray guessed. Shadow's growl deepened, her body rigid as she stood protectively over her puppies. We've got trouble, girl, Ray murmured. He thought of the hidden cache under the floorboards. It wasn't just his service weapons stored there, but files, documentation from his last mission, the one that had gone sideways when they'd discovered American contractors training specialized assets in a region where they shouldn't have been. The mission that had cost him his career and left 3 of his team dead. Had it been Xylon all along? Was this connected? Night fell as Ray prepared the cabin, moving Shadow and her puppies to the basement where they would be safe. His military training kicked in as he secured entry points and established lines of sight. He called Elena, keeping his voice low. "I need you to contact Lieutenant Diaz from the 5th Special Forces. Tell her Ray Davidson has what she's looking for regarding Xylon." Elena didn't ask questions, another benefit of their shared military background. Ray checked the security system he'd installed after returning from overseas, paranoia that now seemed justified. Motion sensors covered the perimeter, connected to silent alerts. One by one, the sensors began triggering on his tablet display, showing methodical movement. Shadow paced anxiously in the basement, her training evident in the way she positioned herself. Alert, ready. This wasn't her first combat situation. When Ray descended the stairs to check on them, she immediately moved to his side, as if reporting for duty. "You remember this, don't you?" Ray said quietly. "But this time, you're not alone." Upstairs, he retrieved a small velvet pouch from beneath the floorboards, containing the Medal of Valor he'd received after the mission that ended his career. The mission involving contractors with experimental military assets. The pieces were starting to connect. The attack came at midnight, professional, coordinated. 2 men approached from the east, another from the west. Ray watched through night vision binoculars as they communicated with hand signals he recognized from special operations training. When the first man reached the porch, Ray stepped into view, his rifle raised. "That's far enough," he called out. "Private property." The man stopped, his face obscured by tactical gear. "We're not here for trouble. We're looking for stolen property, a service dog, and her litter." "No stolen property here," Ray replied steadily. "Just a neglected, abused animal I found half dead in a storm." "That dog is specialized military property," another voice called from the darkness. "Worth more than you can imagine. Hand her over and we'll compensate you generously." Ray recognized the voice with a chill. Carter Rhodes, former Delta Force who'd disappeared into private contracting 5 years ago. They'd served together briefly in Iraq. "She's not property," Ray answered, "and she's not for sale." The standoff might have continued, but a vehicle approached, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The men melted back into the woods as a police cruiser pulled up. Sheriff Davis stepped out, hand resting on his holster. Ray had met him only twice since moving here. An understanding had developed between them that Ray valued his privacy. "Everything all right, Ray?" "Got a call about suspicious activity up here." Ray lowered his rifle slightly. "Had some unwelcome visitors, claiming to be from Xylon operations." The sheriff's expression darkened. "Those guys again. They've been asking around town about a missing dog. Didn't like the feel of them, so I've been keeping an eye out." After the sheriff left, promising to patrol the area, Ray returned to the basement where Shadow waited with her puppies. "They'll be back," he told her, stroking her head. "But we'll be ready." Over the next week, Ray prepared. He contacted old military connections, gathering information about Xylon and their operations. Marcus Wong sent encrypted files showing Xylon's facilities, sterile training rooms far different from standard K-9 units. Lieutenant Diaz called, her voice tight with urgency. "Ray, what you've stumbled into goes beyond animal cruelty. Xylon's K-9 program is part of Project Cerberus, a classified initiative to create enhanced service animals with augmented cognitive abilities." "Enhanced how?" Ray asked, watching Shadow through the window as she methodically patrolled the property perimeter, a behavior he hadn't taught her. "Genetic modification, neural implants, specialized conditioning," Diaz explained. They've been selecting for heightened intelligence and empathic responses. The dogs can anticipate threats before they materialize, sense emotional states, even understand complex verbal commands beyond normal canine capability. What Ray discovered disturbed him deeply. Evidence of experimental training using painful reinforcement methods, drugs to enhance performance, and dogs worked until they broke physically and mentally. Elena arrived with specialized food for nursing mothers and medicine for the puppies. She brought news from town, more strangers asking questions, showing photos of Shadow. "They're offering $50,000 now for information," she said. "People are talking." "No wonder you ran," Ray told Shadow as they sat together on the porch, watching the puppies play in the fenced yard he had built. "You were saving more than just yourself." A memory surfaced. Rex, his former canine partner, exhibiting unusual behaviors before his sudden death. The official report had claimed a heart condition, but Ray had always suspected something more. Had Rex been an early Xylon experiment? Shadow had transformed in the month since her arrival. Her coat now shone with health, her eyes clear and confident. The puppies had grown strong, playing with the boundless energy of youth, unaware of the danger that threatened their newfound peace. Ray noticed something else, subtle differences in the puppies' behavior. Ranger could unlock the simple latches Ray installed on their enclosure. Scout would bring specific items when named, despite never being trained to retrieve them. Maverick seemed to understand emotions, always appearing when Ray felt his darkest memories surface. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Ray was teaching Shadow a new command when she suddenly stiffened, her ears alert. Without warning, she bolted toward the puppies, gathering them with urgent nudges toward the cabin. Ray grabbed his rifle just as 3 SUVs appeared on the long driveway leading to his property. "Inside, Shadow! Now!" Ray commanded, and she obeyed instantly, herding her puppies through the door. 6 men emerged from the vehicles, led by a tall figure in an expensive suit, nothing like the tactical team from before. This was someone in charge. Ray recognized him from his military intelligence briefings years ago. Dr. James Keller, former DARPA scientist specializing in enhanced combat capabilities. "Mr. Davidson," the man called out, stopping at a safe distance. "I'm James Keller, Director of Canine Operations at Xylon. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Ray stood on the porch, rifle lowered but ready. He noticed Elena's truck parked discreetly behind his cabin. She'd arrived earlier to check on the puppies. Inside, she would be contacting Lieutenant Diaz according to their contingency plan. "I have a dog and her puppies that I rescued from certain death. They're not going anywhere." Keller smiled thinly. "That animal represents millions in research and training. She's not just any dog. She's the prototype for our next generation of security canines. The technology in her training is proprietary." "Technology?" Ray spat. "She's a living being that you abused and who escaped from you." "We have court orders," Keller said, pulling documents from his jacket, "and the authority to reclaim her by any means necessary." Ray noticed Carter Rhodes among Keller's men, his former comrade's expression unreadable behind tactical sunglasses. Had he known what Xylon was really doing when he joined them? From inside the cabin, Shadow watched through the window, her eyes fixed on Keller. The puppies huddled behind her, silent and still, behavior unusual for their age, as if they understood the gravity of the situation. "She remembers you," Ray noted coldly, "and not fondly." Keller's smile faltered. "Phantom was our greatest success until she became problematic during pregnancy. We simply need her and the puppies returned. The genetic line is invaluable." "Her name is Shadow now," Ray corrected, "and she's made her choice." "You don't understand what you're interfering with, Davidson," Keller said, his voice hardening. "These animals are the future of warfare. Shadow carries genetic modifications that allow for enhanced sensory perception, improved cognitive function, and empathic capabilities we've only begun to understand." Her puppies represent the next generation, stable inherited traits without the neural implants we needed for the first generation. The standoff might have escalated, but the sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention. 3 police cruisers and an unmarked federal vehicle pulled up behind the Xylon SUVs. Sheriff Davis stepped out, followed by men and women in FBI jackets. Among them was Mike, Ray's old friend, and beside him, Lieutenant Maria Diaz, now an FBI agent. They'd served together in Afghanistan. She'd been there when Rex died. "James Keller," called one of the federal agents, "we have a warrant for your arrest in connection with animal cruelty and illegal experimentation charges." Keller's face drained of color as he was read his rights and placed in handcuffs. The Xylon team, outnumbered and outgunned, surrendered without resistance, all except Carter Rhodes, who slipped away during the confusion. Ray noted his absence but said nothing. Some reckonings would have to wait. Later, as federal agents documented Shadow's condition and took statements, Lieutenant Diaz explained the situation to Ray on his porch, away from the commotion. "Your call triggered an ongoing investigation. Xylon's K9 program has been under scrutiny for years, but we never had enough evidence. Shadow's escape, and your documentation of her condition, gave us what we needed." "They were creating superdogs?" Ray asked, watching as Shadow played with her puppies in the yard, seemingly unbothered by the commotion. "Not just physical enhancements," Diaz said. "They were pushing the boundaries of canine cognition, creating dogs that could understand human language beyond commands, that could anticipate human emotional states, even make complex decisions independently." "What happens to her now?" Ray asked. "Technically, she's evidence," Mike said. "But after the case, she'll need a home. Someone who understands her background, her training, someone she trusts." Ray nodded, understanding the unspoken question. "She's already home." 6 months later, Ray sat on his porch, watching as Shadow guided her puppies, now young dogs themselves, through advanced training exercises in the yard. Each had developed their own personality: Scout, analytical and cautious; Ranger, bold and protective; Maverick, playful but intensely focused when it mattered. Elena had joined Ray's household, her veterinary expertise proving essential for Shadow's continuing recovery. She and Ray had found in each other something neither expected: understanding, companionship, and perhaps more. The court case against Xylon had concluded with multiple convictions and the company's K9 program permanently shut down. Shadow's testimony, in the form of medical examinations, behavioral assessments, and Ray's detailed documentation, had been crucial. Carter Rhodes remained at large, one loose end in an otherwise closed case. Ray had officially adopted Shadow and her puppies, even completing certification to work with a local search and rescue team. Shadow's specialized training, once used for questionable purposes, now saved lives in the mountain wilderness surrounding their home. Lieutenant Diaz visited occasionally, studying the puppy's development with scientific curiosity. "They're unlike any dogs we've seen," she'd noted. "Their intelligence, their emotional responses, they're the bridge between animal and something more." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Shadow trotted up the porch steps and sat beside Ray's chair, her head resting against his leg. Her eyes, once filled with fear and desperation, now held only contentment and trust. "You did good, Shadow," Ray said softly, stroking her head. "You got them to safety. You found home." Shadow looked up at him, and in that moment, Ray understood what had brought them together on that stormy night. They had both been warriors looking for peace, survivors seeking redemption, souls emerging from darkness into light. From behind the tree line, unseen, Carter Rhodes lowered his binoculars. His tablet displayed Shadow's vital signs, transmitted by the microchip Xylon had implanted, the one Elena couldn't remove. Project Cerberus wasn't over. It had merely entered a new phase. Shadow's ears perked up suddenly, her gaze turning toward the distant trees. She sensed something, someone, watching. The battle was won, but the war might not be over. From the darkness of their pasts, they had forged something unbreakable, a family bound not by blood, but by choice, by the conscious decision to protect, to trust, and to love, despite all reasons to do otherwise. Stories like Shadows remind us of the remarkable bond between humans and animals, and the healing power of second chances. If this story touched your heart, consider supporting your local animal shelter, adopting a rescue pet, or donating to organizations that work to prevent animal cruelty. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, sometimes the ones who need saving the most are the ones who end up saving us.